Welcome back to Distorted Opinions. I'm Kayla, and I'm joined by Matt and Ted as always. We've talked in some previous episodes about some of our favorite classic rock artists and songs, and we've just briefly touched on them. I know Matt has brought up Jim Croce and Earth, Wind & Fire. Ted's, I think, grazed on Boston in one episode. I've talked about Black Sabbath very briefly. So we thought today we would talk about some of our favorite classic rock artists and songs. And I know this particular topic is a very broad topic, and we're only going to be just raising the surface of this. Yeah, absolutely. So...
I mean, there's so many songs, and I mean, looking up the definition of classic, I mean, we were talking songs in the past 20 years. Right. I saw was like when the designation starts. So God. Classic, yeah, I know. Feels God. Like feel very old. That stuff in the 90s, like Soundgarden,
Nirvana,
Nirvana are classics now.
God.
Not mean to burst the bubble here, but we're talking the classics when we were younger. So classics, I suppose. 70s and 80s.
Classic squared.
The original classics.
The OG. OG classic rock. So even then, that catalog is massive. And so I've only put together, just cherry picked 5 songs out of the different eras there from that genre, just to highlight. Obviously, there's a bunch more. And I mean, I know even in the pre-show, you guys were talking about, oh, did you pick this one? Oh, nah, I swore you're going to pick that one. There's so much to unpack here. But to just get to my list, starting off with a 1970 cover by Santana, Black Magic Woman. Got to start there. It's a cover. Fleetwood Mac released it in 1968.
Wow.
See, I didn't know that.
I did not know that either. When I think Black Magic Woman, I instantly think of Santana.
Think of the Santana version because it was more popular. But the original was released by Fleetwood Mac in 1968, and Santana covered it 2 years later and made it better. And everyone knows it, but it is indeed a cover. So, I mean, it's...
Wow.
Yeah, I mean, it stands the test of time. It's Santana's version anyway. Definitely has the Latin roots of Santana in there, and it's just it's a catchy tune. You just kind of want to groove to it every time it comes on.
Absolutely.
But definitely one to pick up here. Another one from the 70s on my list is Leonard Skinner's "Gimme 3 Steps."
Oh yeah.
Yes, great.
Another good grooving tune. And I listened to it again this morning, just to remind myself of the song and the aspects of it. And I didn't realize, because I went into it listening for the drums as a drummer, and not realizing how much cowbell and the congas were in the background of that song. And just thinking of a possible jam in the future, if we ever were to do this song, I'm like,
we need a cowbell.
I don't have congas.
Time to get a cowbell.
Yeah,
we do have the cowbell.
I got 2 cowbells. That's
more
fine.
Cowbell.
I know.
I got a fever. And it's not from COVID.
I can taste food.
By the end of this jam session, baby, you'll all be wearing gold-plated diapers.
Yeah, so I mean, not realizing that there was so much cowbell and congas behind the percussion of that song was really neat. But obviously, you're just thinking of the rockin' guitar that really drives the whole song, and the bass line. Oof, that bass is really the glue of that song too. So, "Gimme 3 Steps" is a great tune. Moving forward through the 70s, on the 1979, have to talk about Pink Floyd. And The Wall, but the song in particular, "Comfortably Numb," absolute classic. There is a live performance. It was released on MTV. It was Pink Floyd performing it live at Knebworth Park, apparently Kneb Worth Park. And the guitarist has a red Strat, And
sounds familiar.
It sounds familiar from possibly a different episode that we talked about.
That's right.
And so he has a red Strat, and he's playing, and then it starts raining, and you can see the rain on the fretboard, and I'm thinking, oh, the electronics, oh man. But they sound great. They finished a song, and I was like, huh, you can play electric guitar in the rain. Probably not a safe idea, but it's in the video. So,
yeah, I always thought that was a risk of being electrocuted.
Yeah, you would think. Oh, well grounded, apparently.
I guess so.
So, but that was a 1990 performance of that song. But that one's another classic. I mean, The Wall in general. There's so many Pink Floyd songs to unpack, but that one really stands out. Into the early 80s, we got some ZZ Top, which... I'll highlight Legs, but there's Sharp Dressed Man. Like there's so many good tunes.
Hush.
Yeah, Grange. Like they had a lot of great tunes. But the Legs came out in 1983 on the Eliminator album. That one stands out. I mean, it's a little weird now because it's kind of, I don't know, Me Too era now, and looking back of being able to, I don't know, accost women in a sense of their looks and whatnot. But the song itself is good. In over to 84, have to talk about Van Halen and Panama, because whenever that song comes on, the radio is turned up. I know radio, when we used to listen to radio, would overplay this, but for whatever reason it just never got old for me, or maybe enough time had passed and now I'm back to it, and now I can listen to it whenever I want and it's not overplayed.
I have to agree with you. Panama is one of those classic tunes that could be on repeat and just not get old,
right?
Yeah
that
I mean no disrespect to AC/DC, Back in Black, all those classic tunes and whatnot. I mean, but Panama is one of those classics that like just it could be on every radio station and it just won't get old.
Exactly. So those are my 5 cherry pick songs. Obviously there's mega artists, and I didn't talk about Ozzy, didn't talk about Led Zeppelin, didn't talk about like the Eagles and Hotel California, obviously a classic. But there's just too much to unpack. We could be here all day. We can make a podcast specifically for classic rock at this point.
All bands that I was actually contemplating putting on my list, and I was like, but I don't know if Matt or Ted are going to talk about them. And I think people kind of know that. I feel like your list had maybe some, I don't want to say lesser known, but not quite. Like they're on a different tier, I feel.
Well, then I didn't want to absolutely just be the list of like, oh yeah, it's just the basic check marks. You gotta dig a little, make it a more interesting, because I didn't want to. I purposely didn't choose those, AC/DC and whatnot, just for that reason. Because everyone, you just think, all right, yeah, okay, it's the same old list, but gotcha, better list.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely.
So with that said, I obviously too much to unpack. What Matt, what do you have on your list to run through for today?
Oh man, Ted, I agree. I mean, we're definitely going to have to circle back on this type of episode again. I mean, depending on the responses from everyone, really enjoying this episode, we're gonna have to recircle it. I mean, there's so many known bands out there, and not so much known bands, but let's talk about the underground bands too, that those one-hit wonders. And I mean, we talked about that in a previous episode about one-hit albums that those I would consider are classic rocks too as well. But I'm gonna and just like what Ted did, I'm gonna go in order or whatnot. And Kayla, I know that in our pre-show we were talking about this, but I'm going to talk about, 1969 Chicago Transit Authority, not to be confused with Chicago, or is it? Well,
bum, bum, bum.
CTA, Chicago Transit Authority. Growing up, Chicago classic rock, in our general area of where we're from, 105.7 FM. It's a classic station, and growing up with classic rock elements, even being a guitarist myself, having that classic rock roots, Chicago comes to mind, and when we're talking about the 1969 album, the first one, Chicago Transit Authority, we have single hits. Does anybody really know what time it is? Do we talk about beginnings? I mean, when you listen to those songs compared to what's out today, I mean, you really know the talent that was brought back then. Talk about discipline, talk about, chord progressions, talking about just the gathering of putting together songs. Does anybody really know what time it is? It starts off as a classic, with that staggered piano intro, and going right into it's like a little bit of a storytelling, and in between us when we all get together. I'm surprised we never play this as a cover.
We need a horn section. I think Chicago. I'm like, we need
marching
horns.
band.
Yeah, I know. We already talked about this too.
One of my favorite seasons ever was when we did Chicago, and I actually screamed when the music arrived in the mail that summer because I was so friggin' excited that we were doing Chicago that year.
Nice.
Not even kidding you.
It's amazing. I mean, if we need to bust out, Kayla, if you need to bust out the French horn, I could go dust off my trombone.
I got a trumpet actually, and
even a trumpet. There we go.
I got a trumpet.
Perfect.
I do.
So we
Start practicing now. Who knows when the jam is?
It's gonna be a while.
we just need to get the keyboardist, and then I think we'll be able to do it. But does anybody really know what time it is? Classic beginnings. Beginnings is, I feel like, one of those underrated type of melodic tunes that never really got the necessary recognition that should have gotten. Maybe that's because it's a little mellow, but at that time, that was the generation of kind of like that distorted type of the element of fuzz. We're talking about the Cream era, the Jimi Hendrix era.
Right.
The fuzz was just still getting popularized into music, but there was also still that classical element of just clean chord progressions, and what I mean by clean is not so much of a distorted aspect of sound when it comes down to recording, or maybe through amps, or maybe through guitars, even humbuckers and all that stuff. So again, all different types, but Beginnings is one of those I felt like at that time was the ballad time of at that time. And then, Kayla, I'm not sure if you wanted to talk about, more about what about Chicago, when it came down to, and you were mentioning about the brass section as well.
Yeah. So, I mean, and we talked a little bit about this before we started the show, but, Matt, you were talking about how they transitioned a bit from the 70s to the 80s and became kind of more of a power ballad, I guess, kind of band, which for me, I compared it to the people who compare the David Lee Roth era and the Sammy Hagar era of Van Halen, and there are people that like both, and there are people that absolutely hate the Sammy Hagar era of Van Halen, like that's not Van Halen. And I feel like it's kind of similar with the 70s and 80s era of Chicago, because I think they really kind of lost some of that heavy brass section that they had going into the 80s. I think it was still there, but not to the extent, like the brass was a big part of the music in the 70s era of Chicago, and that's one of the things I really like about Chicago's music, I think, is the right. brass portion of that. And so for me, while I don't hate the 80s era Chicago music, I definitely would say it's not my favorite era of Chicago. The 70s era was really like the era for me as far as Chicago's concerned. So,
100% agree. And
yeah.
it's definitely a apples to oranges aspect. And I know I'm one of those people that prefers the 70s version, the late 60s, the late 60s and all of 70s Chicago versus 80s and up. I mean, when I'm thinking about Chicago in the 80s, I'm more thinking about Peter Cetera, when he left the band to go do his own solo stuff. And even to this day, Peter Cetera has such a very unique type of voice that, again, back then he did a lot of the singing for Chicago, on top of having Robert Lamb as the keyboardist and vocalist for Chicago. But when people think of Peter Cetera, they're thinking of Chicago. And then when he left the band to go do his own solo stuff, for single hits like Gloria Love from Karate Kid Part 2, a lot of people get that mixed up with, oh, well, that's Chicago. Well, not necessarily. No, that's Peter Cetera. So again, I think it's kind of that misinformation of, that transition of when Chicago was going into the power ballads. But we're not here to talk about, the Chicago version of the power ballads. We're talking about when Chicago was in its prime. They were Terry Kath, rest in peace. I mean, I feel like I'm still baffled to this day that there is not a Terry Kath signature Telecaster out there. And Fender, if you are hearing this, what are you guys doing? I mean, Terry Kath needs to have his own signature Telecaster. I mean, we're talking about, with the pig nose, stickers. I mean, guys, get it out there. Terry Kath. I mean,
sounds like you need to make your own as a prototype.
You know what? I actually have a Telecaster right here that I'm really, really contemplating about making it, because this guy, there's two people that influence me personally from a guitar standpoint when it comes to playing: my dad and Terry Kath. I couldn't tell you how many times I've watched Terry Kath YouTube videos of this guy playing, and it's just mind-boggling that this guy is amazing. And I mean, what's also great about him too, and ironically, I'm wearing a hockey jersey, Mighty Ducks, that when he played on stage, he wore hockey jerseys on stage, and that was just how he was. So the Terry Kath era, which I like to call from Chicago, you have the 25-624. You also have Make Me Smile. Those are classic tunes that, again, Chicago had that folky element to their music when they wrote, but it wasn't so much that power ballad. It still had kind of like the folkiness to it and whatnot. But that's Chicago. Noah spent a lot of time on that, so I'm going to briefly go through these next ones and whatnot. So, Ted, I always think of your dad whenever I listen to this band, because obviously growing up, couldn't tell you how many times I heard this song. But I'm talking about Allman Brothers from the Brothers and Sisters album, 1973, song Jessica.
Oh, good stuff.
Excellent tune.
Excellent instrumental tune. Allman Brothers. Now, when we're thinking of Allman Brothers, you also have the 1972 album Eat a Peach with their single Melissa. And then you have Jessica, and it's all instrumental. And I want to say it's like a 7+ minute tune. And Ted, I mean, growing up with you over 20 years, I couldn't tell you how many times I've endlessly heard your dad play this song, and it's amazing to this day.
I mean, he I don't know, has his go-to starters, and
Oh, it's amazing. I consider your dad a part of the Allman Brothers band.
I think he'll get a kick out of hearing that.
That's how much I hear, and it's again that type of that song is incredible. It's kind of got like this. And I don't know, and if you guys heard, obviously, when I think of this song, I think of more of like it's kind of like a surf type of, almost like surf type of vibe, like do 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 do. Like I think I'm like on a surfboard and like tight shorts, but in California on a hot summer day. Not tan because
it's quite a visual.
Get my ass burnt, but hey, I'm not California. I'm a New Englander, baby, from Boston. But but that's what I think of. 1973. Brothers and sisters, Jessica, and then finally, excuse me, I could not end my segment without talking about Doobie Brothers. Doobie Brothers, Doobie Brothers, Doobie Brothers, Doobie Brothers, and Doobie Brothers. Yes, my number is 5, so I had to say that 5 times and whatnot. But The Captain and Me, 1973. 1973 came out with so many incredible albums. These are just 2 albums I want to reference. But The Captain and Me, you have Long Train Running, you have China Grove. Again, listening to those songs, I mean, Tom Johnson, I mean, in the gang, just wow. And China Grove introduced me to the reverb pedal. It's incredible. I think when anyone hears China Grove, that first chord and that reverb pedal kicking in, you instantly know that you're going into a groove. China Grove is one of those groove tunes. Long Train Running is also one of those groove tunes that has like a southern rock element to it. Almost very, very similar to Lynyrd Skynyrd. So listening to those songs, again, I grew up on those songs, listening to all my life. And those, not only are they great songs, but they're also personal songs to me as well. And those albums are incredible. I mean, if you haven't had a chance to listen to the whole album from beginning to end, if any album that I recommend is definitely The Captain and Me from 1973, Doobie Brothers. It's just an incredible, incredible album.
So can I also just point out, according to Wikipedia, Doobie Brothers released an album every year.
Yes, they did.
71, 72, 73, 74, 75, 76, 77, 78. Then they took 1979 off and released in 1980.
Yep.
Like,
and
holy moly. Like, just churning out, like, that's a lot of music to turn out in a year. And to be that dedicated, because clearly we know a lot of musicians these days where it might be 2-3 years between albums, or, I mean, granted, it was a different era altogether. But when you just look at the release dates for all of their albums, it is, it's quite sequential. It doesn't miss a year. It's kind of nuts.
It's crazy. And that, so if there's anything too, with the Doobie Brothers, and hopefully we're not telling our age and whatnot, but when we referenced in the previous episode, VH1's Behind the Music, and Behind the Music has a great hour-long episode of the Doobie Brothers, and I definitely recommend checking it out. It tells from the very beginning till obviously up to that point. But what's really incredible is, again, the story behind the Doobie Brothers, and again, bring kind of that transition into a little bit of the power ballad. Now, Doobie Brothers, I feel, is a little bit of an exempt, because when Tom Johnson obviously had to go into rehab, okay, then they brought on, Michael McDonald. Michael McDonald, definitely a very distinctive voice, totally different element, and definitely brought in another genre to that southern rock type of element, until Tom Johnson came back to the band, and then they all formed the super group. Doobie Brothers was leaning more into that power ballad type of aspect. Taking It to the Streets is it's a classic song, but again, when you're thinking of Taking It to the Streets and then Long Train Running or China Grove, again, apples and oranges, totally different. You wouldn't even think that that was Doobie Brothers. But I feel like when Tom Johnson came back into the group, it brought that classic element back, but again, kind of morphed it in a way that Doobie Brothers didn't lose their signature sound and whatnot. But so definitely recommend checking it out. Check out VH1 Behind the Music's the Doobie Brothers episode from beginning to end. I also recommend checking out the from beginning to end 1973 album Captain Me. But other than that, that's enough from my end. Kayla, let's shoot off to you.
All right, so real quick before I get to my list, because I know Ted mentioned Black Magic Woman actually being written by Fleetwood Mac. So another classic that I don't know if you guys know this, but Blinded by the Light, which is, I think, most well known because of Manfred Mann, was actually written by Bruce Springsteen. And
really?
Also recorded by Bruce Springsteen in the E Street Band. And to hear his version is very different than the Manfred Mann version, but the Manfred Mann version is the version that I think most people think of when they hear the name of that song. So, I think there's a lot of that out there, just like there's a lot of artists that had very popular songs that Prince actually wrote, like Sinead O'Connor's Nothing Compares to You was actually a Prince song. So, I think there's a lot more of that than we realize, but I definitely didn't know that Black Magic Woman was a Fleetwood Mac song. I'm
totally
idea.
Listening to the Fleetwood Mac version.
I'm gonna have to go listen to it now. So I'm gonna try to breeze through my list here. I didn't focus so much on songs as much as I did groups of the era, and like Matt and Ted both said, this is just very like top of the surface episode of just briefly covering some of these things. I think, honestly, I was originally thinking, like, yeah, we'd probably have to dedicate an episode to each decade. We could probably dedicate an episode to a specific year and just spend an hour talking about the various albums that came out in that year that were classics. But for today, I've narrowed it down to 4 bands in particular that I'm going to talk about. And I'm going to start by throwing it back to the 70s with a band that's one of my all-time favorite classic rock bands. And that's Boston.
Yes.
So good.
Big thumbs up for that.
Yeah. Love Boston.
It's definitely more than a feeling.
Oh, jeez.
It's so many good albums, too.
Yeah, no, they had so many awesome albums, and they have such a classic, distinctive sound that Boston is one of those bands you know when you're hearing them, because they've just got that sound. And they had, off their 1976 self-titled album, so many hits. More Than a Feeling, probably the most well-known off of that album, but there's also Peace of Mind. Just so many awesome songs. But my favorite track, probably of all time, by Boston is off their 1978 album, the title track, Don't Look Back. I don't know what it is about this song, but this to me is like, Ted, you had mentioned one of your picks is you crank the radio when you hear that come on. That this is the crank the radio song for me when I hear it come on. I just love this song. In fact, as you guys know, but others maybe don't, I love camping, and I have an old school, not actually old school, but I still use an FM radio with an antenna when I'm camping. And as we've talked about on previous shows, the station that I like to listen to around here is no longer on the air, which has left me trying to find other stations to listen to. And it seems that most of the rock stations that are still in existence in the Boston area tend to play mostly classic rock, so mostly stuff from like the 60s and 70s to probably about maybe the mid 2000s to 2010. So occasionally I will hear Peace of Mind, or I'm sorry, Don't Look Back, come on when I'm camping, and I have to really resist the urge because I'm trying to be a polite and friendly camper and not annoy my neighbors by cranking the radio. So I've got it on just like loud enough that I can hear it at my campsite, but not beyond the perimeter of that. And it's really hard for me to not want to turn it up so that everybody has to listen to it, because I just love this song. But
so I've got a fun fact for Boston, though.
Yeah.
Story many people probably don't know.
Are they from Boston?
Tom Schultz wrote most of the tracks by himself in his home.
Wow.
And negotiated a deal with the record label to produce it. Mm-hmm. The record label said, great, where's your band? The guy didn't have a band and actually needed to find musicians to play the music that he wrote.
Wow.
So Boston is not a official band in a true sense, because it was mostly written by Tom Schultz in his house in Massachusetts.
Wow.
But in order to tour, and they signed a deal for a handful of albums,
right, they
literally needed to hire people to play the music that he wrote.
Wow.
So
I had no idea.
Yeah,
I just assumed they were like a band that got picked up by a record label. Nope,
it was Epic Records. But I will encourage all of our listeners to just dive in to a little history if you're interested in that, because Boston, as we know and love, and all their tunes, mega fan. Yeah. Third Stage, probably my favorite album that they ever put out, but the history behind it and how they came to be is not as... It's very unique to any other band that is so popular that I feel like. So definitely wanted to drop that in, because I would be remiss, and I would hear about it from my father listening to this episode if I didn't clear the air with that. So you're welcome, Dad.
Nice. I had no idea. So that is a very interesting fun fact. So thank you for sharing that. I'm going to move on to another band from the 70s that I wouldn't say I'm a huge fan, but they got some real classics that I love, and that band is Deep Purple. Space Truckin', Highway Star, Lazy, all three of those off the 1972 album Machine Head, absolute classics. I don't know exactly what it is he plays, but John Lord, their keyboardist, I'm gonna hazard a guess that it's a Hammond B3, which we've talked about in some other episodes. I love a song with good Hammond B3. I think on top of what Matt was mentioning earlier about fuzz, the fuzz pedal and sound becoming a new thing during that era, I think the combination of that, and then you have the keyboards in that song, they're not what you imagine. Like, when I imagine the Hammond B3, I picture some jazz, like some light Hammond organ. This stuff's really heavy. It almost has a distorted kind of sound to it, and I think that makes Deep Purple's sound really unique. But these songs are just awesome, like Roll Down the Windows in the Summer, Get the Radio Cranking, tapping on the steering wheel, bobbing your head kind of music. And so I really enjoy some of this Deep Purple stuff. And, not having been around during that era, a few times when I was younger, like maybe middle school, high school age, I remember talking to my dad and my guitar teacher and friend Greg about, in particular, Van Halen, because like I got why Van Halen was popular, but not having been around during that time period, I didn't really understand what it was that was such a big deal about them. Like their sound, everybody talks about how the sound was such a big deal for that time, and nobody had ever heard it. And they tried to explain this to me, and at the time, I was a kid, I didn't really get it. I certainly get it now that I'm older, but I feel like Deep Purple kind of also falls into that category of, I suspect that the sound that Deep Purple had was probably not something that was heard of during that time, and so I feel like they kind of set the stage for a lot of other bands and influenced a lot of other bands with their sound. But just awesome stuff off of, in particular, Machine Head. And then moving ahead to the 80s, and this is the band where I'm going to kind of spend a little bit more of my time, because we've lightly touched on some of their stuff in previous episodes, and I wouldn't say I'm a super fan of these guys either, but I do love a lot of their stuff.
Metallica.
Sorry. Well, I would certainly say that I'm a super fan of them, so I'm not sure that really applies here.
Especially the album Master of Puppets.
I like
how we're just derailing her.
I thought you were going to say
gearing
Saint
up,
Anger.
and we're just taking it back.
It's all good.
No, you thought I was talking about Saint Anger. No. I said Master of Puppets, Kayla. Come on.
I heard that. I heard that now.
Sorry.
So,
Go ahead.
No, it's all good. So I actually didn't put Metallica on this list only because, as we discussed at the very beginning of this show, and I know, Ted, you looked up the definition of classic, and I know that at this point Metallica is probably considered classic rock, but I just can't view them in that way, so they are not on my list as classic rock. Now, if we cover decade by decade and we eventually get to 1981, I can start talking about Kill 'Em All, and that's, I think, different than me being like, these are classic rock.
I think we're going to have an episode dedicated to just Metallica. I mean,
well, I could certainly cover a series.
Spin-off podcast. Kayla
right.
Talks Metallica.
That's right. I could.
Kayla Talks.
I really could. But
sorry.
No.
Anyway, your bands.
So,
We've
so,
derailed this.
Yeah, no, it's good. Metallica not on the list. So I'm actually going to talk about Rush. And I've talked about how I have a huge level of respect for these three musicians, and I know that their music, they're another one of those bands that they're not necessarily everyone's cup of tea. It seems that you either love them or hate them. I don't know why.
I don't know how you can hate them.
I don't know either, but I know there are people that don't like them, and but
if anyone is listening to this and you are not a Rush fan,
send us a message and explain to us why.
Yes, please.
Very curious.
That might help us understand.
distortedopinionshow@gmail.com. You could send us an email.
Yep.
That's right.
Please let us know. I'd be very curious. We're not looking at debate. You might get a distorted opinion, but
You're getting our
if you have a favorite
right
era,
now.
that's fine. But overall, who hates Rush?
Yeah, I mean, I know there are people that don't like them, and I just, whether you like them or not, I think there's one thing is for sure. You have to admit that the level of musical talent among those three men is uncharted. I don't care if you don't like them. There's no way you can't admit at least that much. So, again, not the biggest fan on the face of the planet by any means, but they've got so many classic hits. You've got Tom Sawyer, Limelight, Subdivisions, Free Will, Fly By Night. I mean, I could go on all day naming all of the classic hits that Rush had that were played on the radio in particular. That doesn't even cover all the other stuff off their albums that wasn't really a radio hit necessarily. But there's one track in particular that I think is probably my all-time favorite Rush track. And that is YYZ off the 1981 album Moving Pictures. Mm-hmm. And this track, I'm about to let out a little maybe secret here. So, while not directly ham radio related, it is kind of a ham radio tie-in, and I think this is probably a pretty well-known fact, but maybe not. So if you didn't know this, you're welcome. So YYZ, the intro, is actually Morse code for YYZ, which is the code of Toronto Pearson Airport, which is the airport near Rush's hometown. And so where that ties in is CW Morse code with ham radio, and so like I kind of nerded out because for a long time I actually didn't know this. I don't know Morse code, but I know a lot of ham operators that do, and I want to learn it. And so I had no idea that the intro of that song was Morse code for YYZ. So that was a fun fact for me.
Interesting.
But yeah, so I don't know if you guys knew that.
Nope.
Yep, it's Morse code for YYZ. So from, a guitar perspective on this song, and I'm sure there are probably a lot of other guitar players that would disagree with me on this. I find this song to be complicated, but maybe that just means that I'm not that great of a guitar player because I can't really play this all that well. But
well, you can take that back because you are definitely a great guitar player.
Well, thank you, but I can't play this song, or I can't play most of this song, which either means I have a lot of work to do, or I think the more obvious choice here is that Alex Lifeson is a highly underrated guitar player. I am amazed that more people don't talk about his guitar playing because
everyone's too busy talking about Neil.
I guess. I mean, yeah, mm-hmm. Neil was definitely the master of drums, but I mean, and Geddy's bass playing is out of this world. I played bass, but I don't play, like, I don't consider that my primary instrument, so I wouldn't call myself an expert at playing a bass by any means, but I feel like Geddy's stuff it's gotta be pretty hard to play. I've never tried to play it, but again, in this song in particular, I feel like there's no aspect of the instrumentation that's not challenging, and not being a drummer, I can't say for sure, but knowing what I know about Neil Peart, I feel like the drums on this song are probably pretty complicated to play. The bass lines sound like they're really complicated to play. If you watch Geddy play the bass lines, he makes it look really easy, but I feel like it's just really hard. Same thing with the guitar. It sounds like it's not super complex, and it looks like it might not be hard to play, but I'll be damned if I can't play the frickin' intro to that song. Like, the only thing I can really play, I can kind of play like bits and pieces of the solo, and even then the solo, like, I think the solo is one of the coolest parts of that song because it's got a real exotic Middle Eastern feel to it, and that comes from the fact that he's playing largely with a dominant Phrygian mode, which if you don't play guitar or if you're not a musician, that probably means nothing to you, but you know, that is a large part of why that solo has that sound. And it's such an awesome song. It's all instrumental. Love that song. If I didn't make that clear, I love that song.
wait, you like that song?
I do.
You love that song.
I do. And
it doesn't sound like you love the song, though.
If there's anybody that hates it, again, we want to know why. So send us an email, distortedopinionshow@gmail.com. And so with that, I've spent a lot of time on just YYZ and Rush, so I'm going to move on to my last band on my list, which is another 80s band, Whitesnake.
Nice.
Whitesnake, popular hits, again, radio hits, Here I Go Again, Still of the Night, Is This Love, Give Me All Your Lovin', all of those off their 1987 self-titled album. Here I Go Again is probably the most well-known song, I think, that they did. And interestingly enough, so I don't know if they did two versions of this song, so that, like, my guess is that one was more for top 40 stations and one was more for heavier rock stations, but I remember many years ago listening to the local top 40 station here and hearing this song come on and being kind of put off when it hit the part where the guitar usually kicks in, because there wasn't really much guitar there. It had been kind of replaced with keyboard and synth, and was not at all what I was expecting. And
radio edit.
Yeah, I guess, or like I said, maybe they did a different version for top 40 versus heavier rock stations, because the version that I was familiar with, having heard on AAF many, many times, was the one that had the heavy guitar, which is the version you hear on this album.
The real version.
Then, right,
yeah,
as far as I'm concerned, yeah. But then there's some other version that's floating around out there that gets played on less heavy stations. That's the heavy guitar has been replaced with this synth keyboard, and I don't like it, to be totally honest. But, you know, those guys had a lot of classic 80s hits that come to my mind when I think of classic rock bands. And so I'm not going to spend as much time on them, because I did spend quite a bit of time on Rush and YYZ. But that was my very short list of bands. Like I said, there were so many others. I thought about Led Zeppelin and Black Sabbath, and we didn't touch on AC/DC or Van Halen really, other than a couple of like little moments here and there. So many bands.
And it was funny because when I was putting this list together, and I wanted to make it a little bit more obscure, and I just kept on Xing out band songs and putting new ones in. I'm like, yeah, but then there's this one. Keeping it to 5. All right, remove this one, put this one in. It could have spent all day. I mean, you could easily do a top 100. I mean, there's there's already people that are doing that, but
split into 5 parts, the top 100.
Yeah, right. But yeah,
that's our
definitely.
Next 25 episodes for the year is like 1/4 of the list. So that's it for my list. I don't know if...
Let me just jump in real quick and some trivia. So Kayla, you talked about Deep Purple and Whitesnake
Yeah.
in the same episode. Do you know what they have in common?
I feel like I do, but it's slipping my mind at the moment. I feel like, go ahead and tell me. We'll see.
David
We'll see if I know.
Coverdale,
Yep.
lead singer of Whitesnake,
Yep.
and was also the lead singer of Deep Purple from 1973 to 1976.
Okay. I think I did know that, yes.
I did not know that.
Not
but
sure if
that's
that was a
interesting.
coincidence or whatnot, but
It was a pure coincidence. There was no connection there in my decision to talk about those two bands. So, fun fact, fun tie-in.
A lot of fun
That's,
facts in this episode.
There are, yeah.
so.
We're going to quiz people.
Santana and then Boston facts and then that fun fact. There's a lot of fun facts today.
Yeah. Oh, yeah.
Fun facts.
We could do a whole show just on
Distorted
fun facts.
opinions. Fun facts.
A weekly segment of
New
like
segment.
short segment.
Yeah, good.
Yes.
Yep.
So yes, I did know that, but I had forgotten, and that didn't even pop into my mind when
go.
I chose those two bands. So.
Well, I will say,
connection.
for Song of the Week this week,
Yeah.
my pick is a
Yep.
band we didn't even talk about at all today.
So is mine.
And so is mine.
Oh, no.
Oh.
Are we all going to be okay? I'll go
Go,
first.
go,
How about that?
go.
And I'll get
Break
out
it.
of the way and make you guys
All
scramble
right.
if it's the same
Do it
one.
up.
Specifically, this came off of a 1989 album, Pump, which was their 10th studio album. The song is What It Takes by Aerosmith.
Crap, I'm going to have to look now. No, I'm just kidding.
Yeah, I was gonna say. I mean, the song is, I don't know, it's nostalgic for me. Definitely remember watching the music video on MTV, and they're kind of going into like a interesting time machine of like some chicken wire, bar brawl type of like small town bar gig, and then they step off, and then they're in this arena, and it's just at the end of this song, and it's massive, and then there's like a cowboy hat from the small town gig transitioning over into this giant arena of like, wait, that really happened, that type of tie-in. But that song, just super catchy, and we didn't talk about Aerosmith at all.
No.
That catalog's ridiculous.
Yeah.
And so trying to come up with a song of the week that would be Aerosmith, because I mean, I'm a fan of their song Angel. They're so, I can't even think of there's too much to say for this, but keeping it together, What It Takes, 1989, super good. Highly recommend watching the YouTube video, just because the music video is fun, like I said. So that's my pick for this week.
Awesome.
Matt, who do you have?
All right. So we were talking about, talking more about the 70s genre, the classic genre. And also there was a little bit of that underrated type of band. And that's what I'm mostly focusing on for my song of the week. And it's going to be by this band called Lighthouse, not to be confused with Lifehouse.
Thank you for the clarification,
Lighthouse.
because I was about to smack you
Yep.
through the screen.
Reach through the computer.
Lighthouse is not classic, no. Although a respected band, but no. Lighthouse, specifically a song called "One Fine Morning" from the album, actually from "One Fine Morning," 1971. Kayla, we were talking about horn bands, Chicago. Lighthouse was also one of those bands that had also a brass section as well. And when you first listen to the song, it opens up with a very fast guitar riff and goes right into an asteroid of horns. And it's got I want to say like it's also got like this Latin root type of vibe behind it, and going right into the tune. It's a very fast pace. One of my personal favorites, especially during karaoke times. Oh, what's karaoke again during this pandemic? What was that?
That's a thing.
I think it was a thing back then, or just sing to my TV. Well, I guess we could still practice and stuff, but Lighthouse, One Fine Morning. I can't even describe this type of tune. If anyone has not heard of Lighthouse, I definitely recommend go checking out. Kind of a one-hit wonder type of band, kind of one of those bands that did try to make it go forward, but doesn't seem like they really passed a certain point, especially during the 70s, but they did come out with this great classic tune called One Fine Morning. So definitely recommend checking it out. Again, can't really describe it. It's a great tune. Almost a little bit of Santana roots to it, I want to say. So if you put Santana and you put Chicago together, this is what you got. You got Lighthouse, One Fine Morning. So other than that, that's my pick. And
Nice.
that leaves with Kayla. Kayla, what do you have for a song of the week?
So before I get to my song of the week, because you mentioning Lighthouse and Chicago and the brass section made me think of another band that didn't even make it onto the list that also had a brass section, and that's Blood, Sweat, and Tears. They were well known for Spinning Wheel and You've Made Me So Very Happy. Another really great band that I love, so I'm not going to spend a lot of time on that. Quick reminder, your weekly reminder, that we have a Spotify Song of the Week playlist that if you like any of the songs that we talk about, you want to hear them in their entirety, you can head to the description of every show. We put that link into the description, and you can hear the song on our Song of the Week playlist, so be sure to check that out.
Which is, at this point, ridiculous because it's all over the map. Because all of our picks are... I mean, we've been pretty specific in some of these episodes. So you go from everything from, let's see, Jackson 5 to STP, Rob Zombie, Neil Young, Killswitch Engage,
Not
tennis,
a lot on like my
green
own
sleeves, Nutcracker. I mean, we're all over the map here. This is an insane playlist.
If you plan on taking a road trip anywhere, we definitely recommend having as one of your favorites, Distorted Opinion song of the week on your playlist.
And how
if you
long
want something
is
very eclectic and something that's all over the place?
It's like
the
super
runtime's
heavy,
almost 5
and then
hours.
it goes like super soft. Man, I can't even.
Yeah.
I haven't taken the time to just hit shuffle or just play. It's going to be crazy anyway. But yeah, at this point, it's it's pretty neat.
Eclectic.
Yeah,
it is very
exactly what it is.
Eclectic.
So yes,
anyway, sorry about that.
No worries.
I had to point that out at this point.
Yeah, no. I was thinking that when I put the songs for the holiday episode in there, I was like, "This is gonna make
Christmas
this
tunes in there."
Really weird. When somebody's gonna be in July listening to this, and they're gonna hit a certain point
Christmas
where they're gonna be
July.
like, "Green sleeves, Santa Claus is coming to town." Like, what the frig? So yes, the link is in the description of every show. So if you haven't check it out, check it out, and add that playlist to your favorites on Spotify if you want to be able to quickly access it every week. So with that said, my song is one from a band that we didn't talk about, but we did talk about this band and this song in our acoustic favorites episode. And so I'm circling back around to it because I didn't pick it for my song of the week, and I'm pretty sure I said that I could have picked it for my song of the week and chose not to because I went with another song, so I'm picking it now. And that song is Uncle Tom's Cabin by Warrant off the 1990 album Cherry Pie. I talked about it during the acoustic episode. I love the intro of this song. It's got a bluesy rock sound to it. And actually, upon doing some research, I found out that part, that acoustic part, was actually recorded by Janie Lane's brother, Eric Oswald. Not any of the guitar players from Warrant. It was the singer's brother, which I had no idea. And, Matt, we're probably gonna end up on a side tangent off this next piece of information. So, more information and fun facts to add to this episode. The story behind this song, and actually I have to thank, if he's listening or watching, BJ, who's a photographer friend of mine, mentioned this to me a few weeks ago on social media, and I had no idea, and I started looking into it last night. So, Uncle Tom's Cabin was actually supposed to be the title track off of this album, and it was supposed to be kind of a turning point in the direction of the band.
Oh no,
and
don't tell me.
I know how much Matt dislikes A&R reps, so here we go. So the album, their album Columbia, told them that they needed another song that would be a good radio hit. So their singer literally banged out Cherry Pie in like 15 minutes as kind of like a screw you, this is what we're going to put out kind of thing. And the label ended up making that the title track and the radio hit for the band, which kind of sealed the deal for them being a cliche hair metal band that their music was filled with innuendo and
excuse me for a minute.
Yeah.
Here we go. Oh, he left.
Suck a fart.
Turned his camera off and everything. Just we lost him.
Okay, I'm back now. I got my aggression out.
So yeah, going back to Matt's previous statements about A&R reps kind of I guess directing the musical direction of a band and kind of telling them how it's going to be, and maybe that song is not the best song that band had, but that's the song that the label invested all of their time, money, and effort into promoting. And so for Warrant, that was the case with Cherry Pie. Cherry Pie was not meant to be the title track off of that album. It was supposed to be Uncle Tom's Cabin, which I think is really unfortunate because I wouldn't call myself a big fan of Warrant in general, but I love Uncle Tom's Cabin.
Well, once you get into the middle of that song and the groove is in there,
heavy riffs.
That riff is nice.
It's simple, but it's heavy. It's effective. It's good.
I mean, perfect for the era. Like, that was real nice.
Yeah. And it's not the 80s. It's 1990, but it's still got that. I mean, 1990 was still like on the cusp of a lot of
heavily influenced.
Yeah, so
grunge music hasn't been taken over.
Right, that era hadn't started yet.
92.
Right.
Right. Yeah, 1990 is still like that. Okay, we're still in a little bit of the hair metal.
Right.
Poppy makeup.
Weren't able to peel off the
like
leather pants yet.
End of it, I think, was like 1990, 1991. But yeah, so I thought that was really interesting because I had no idea that was supposed to be the big hit for the band and that they had spent a lot of time working on that song and having it be a turning point in their musical careers, and then the label stepped in and shot that down and made Cherry Pie the big deal that it ended up being. And like I said, very cliche.
Reps need to sit back. If you are signing a band, you're obviously signing them because they are good. They are good because they have no friggin' rules against what they write. And then you have these people that don't know their shit.
I knew when I typed the notes Matt was going to get real pissed with this particular segment.
I have no respect for them. Yeah. They could go suck a fart out of a chicken ass. I don't care.
I'm not even sure if I should censor that somehow when I do the broadcast version of this.
Real musicians.
He didn't swear really there, but
yeah, I mean it's listen, we got reality shows out there, okay, that or do worse than what I say.
I know. But I know.
Yeah, it's all those bands out there. If you're not signed, keep doing what you're doing, baby. That's the real talent. The real talent. If you are an A&R rep, please send us an email directed to me. I will rip you
Attention,
a new
Matt.
one. Yes, attention knew it. Please tell me how you are smarter than the actual talented musicians out there. Please sit back, enjoy your coffee, okay, and jerk off to a magazine. I don't care. Okay, you might want to censor that one too, Kayla. Anyways, on that note,
this was a fun episode.
It was indeed.
Great tunes. Everyone listening got great picks from all of us. Classic tunes, and you know, you may be questioning, hey, what are some, good tunes I need to put on my playlist? Again, you could check out our, Song of the Week playlist. We'll have all these songs up there. You may even know, you may even be introduced or influenced by an album that you never would have thought of. So, definitely check out these albums that we all recommended.
And definitely reach out to us and let us know what some of your favorites are, because we clearly just cherry picked a couple of things and there's way too much to talk about, as we've already reiterated so many times over in this episode. But love to hear from you. Comment, leave a voice message on our Anchor page, anchor.fm/distortedopinions, or just email at distortedopinionsshow@gmail.com. And love to hear from you. And I mean, so much to unpack here. And
Absolutely.
I'm just, after doing this for so many weeks, I feel like I've memorized some of Kayla's script, so I meant to take that from her on purpose.
I'm happy to let someone else do it.
But on the other hand, is there anything on your list that I forgot to mention?
Nope, just
on your script?
If you haven't, so if you've been watching the video version of the show, you probably know by now that we're only uploading the full versions of the episodes to our YouTube channel, so be sure to head over and check that out. We've got the link to it on the Anchor page, I believe. If not, I will make sure to try and put it on there. If you don't find it there, just search Distorted Opinions on YouTube and you'll find us. Be sure to hit subscribe and hit the bell notification, or the bell icon, so that you get notifications when we post new episodes.
Ding.
That's right. Ding, ding.
Ding, dang.
Hit the bell. No, cowbell. They need to replace it with a cowbell for us.
I got a fever.
Not because of COVID. So yeah, just make sure you subscribe to our YouTube channel. We want to reach 100 subscribers so we can get rid of that ugly long URL that they won't let us change until we get at least 100 people subscribing to the channel. And that, I think, is pretty much it. I think Ted and Matt covered everything else, the email address, the Anchor address, and yeah, it's been a good show.
We're good.
We're going to have to revisit it.
Absolutely.
So have a good week, everybody, and be sure to tune in next week. We'll have a whole new episode for you. We'll see you then.
Toodaloo.